Taco Tuesday. It's Taco Tuesday.
Come on.
It's Taco Tuesday. It's TacoTuesday.com. Taco Tuesday. It's Taco Tuesday. It's Taco Tuesday. It's Taco Tuesday.
Hey guys, welcome back to another edition of the TacoTuesday.com podcast. I'm your host Corey, joined once again by my co-host Crawford.
Hello.
Seats. We are excited to be joined today by our guest Chris Flores, aka Eat Migos. Welcome to the show, man.
What's going on, guys? How are y'all?
We're good, man. So obviously, everybody has obviously picked up on it at this point. This is our first remote podcast. This is something that we've been building to and something that we've been looking forward to for a while. And we are beyond fired up to have you on the show and to talk about everything that you do. I want to jump right into it. How did you fall in to everything that it is that you do? Kind of like running around San Antonio and Texas and basically spreading the good word of tacos and good food.
Right. So I had this idea. I was like, you know what? We go out and eat. I do production for a living. And me and the crew, we were always just grabbing tacos and eating. And our conversations were fun. And I was like, you know what? We always had like a small camera with us. Like, I'm going to record our conversations. And people are going to love it because it's fun. We're doing it. And then I'm just going to post them. And my whole thing is like, you know what? If it brings a couple of people to these places, then, you know, it's cool. Right. So first one, man, we go to Eric's Tacos. I break out the camera. There's like 6 of us. I break out the camera and my friends who literally are no holds barred, always clam up. And I'm like basically trying to ask them questions. And it's like the worst experience ever. And I'm like, what's going on, man? I was like, I turn on the camera and you guys clam up. What's going on? And they're like, oh man, turn that thing off. And so I was like, all right. So then I was like, you know what? Eat Migos. So Eat Migos was I hadn't really thought that name up yet. And I was like, you know, I'm going to do something called the 3 Amigos. And in Texas, we do a lot of Spanglish, right? So we mix Spanish. So there was a friend that would really mix up his stuff. So one day he was like, hey, so when are you going to start your taco thing, the Amigos? And I was like, I don't know. And he's like, man, we need to go eat sometime. And I was like, dude, eat. That's right. Eat Migos. I was like, and we're just friends eating together. And he's like, that's awesome, man. It's a great name. So that's kind of how that was born. And then I was like, well, I'm going to get 2 of the friends. We're going to do it. Anyway, no one wanted to do it with me, man. I couldn't get anyone to commit. And it was like 6 months. And I was like, finally, I'm just going to start doing this myself. And my audience will be the Eat Migos. Like these will be my friends. It'll be vlog style. And I just started going around and I got shut down here at that point because this is 2017. The culture was a lot different. So if you broke out a camera or something in a Mexican restaurant, they thought you were like behind the kitchen doors, like newscast trying to shut them down or make them look bad. And I got shut down so much. And, you know, I would try to do what I could. And then finally, I think I had like 2 or 3 successful before I had the successful videos, I said, man, I need a hook. I need to figure out something so that people understand what I'm doing and it's for good. So because I'd done production and I had worked with marketing companies, I was like, I'm going to do my own press release. So, man, I created this video and I'm like, hey, my name's Chris Flores. I'm going to call myself my vlog Eat Migos. It's like my goal is to eat 1 taco from every single taqueria that serves tacos here in San Antonio. And I put it out and like 5 people watched it. But my SA, the news, the digital news, they contacted me and they're like, hey, are you really going to do this? And I'm like, yeah. And they're like, well, then we'd like to do a story on you. And from there, they did it. And what was funny is, and I still stick to this today, people started making fun of me. And they're like, oh, I hope that guy has a good cardiologist and all this crazy stuff, right? But all the negative, everything negative that they were saying about me was just making more people learn about me. There was radio DJs making fun of me, and they're like, well, I'm rooting for him. The other guy's like, oh, well, you know what? He better be exercising, talking a lot of trash. But there I got on one of the local news stations, and they did a whole feature on me. And then I started getting invited by restaurants, and then yeah, man, it was a vlog and it just kind of took off from there.
That's awesome, man. I love that. What a power move, putting out your own press release.
For real.
That's really dope.
Man, I created this fake step and repeat behind me. And like, man, I went big. I went for it, bro. Because like I basically, it was a template of what I had seen the companies that I worked for whenever I was actually shooting. And I basically took whatever their verbiage was and I templated it to myself. I tailored it. And I was like, hey, these are the points I needed to hit. This is what I need to do. And I went big, man. I said it's like CNN. I sent it to everybody, man. I was shooting big. And I will say this, and I want to say it on here because I always say it. I think she was an intern at that point. Her name's Maddie Sky. She was the one who said, hey, if you're really going to do this, I'd like to an intern. And I always tell people there would be no Eat Migos without Maddie Sky. She's the only one who reached out. And because of her, people started learning about me. So every time I see her, because she's still in the media here in town, I always thank her and say, hey, Maddie, I wouldn't be doing anything I'm doing without you. So thanks.
That's awesome.
That's awesome. That's a pretty rad shout out for her too. So
yeah, man, she believed in me.
Yeah. So obviously, okay, you grow up in a place like Texas, California, right? Mexican food is a huge part of the culture. We've been surrounded by it for our whole lives.
Sure.
Much more so than probably the rest of the United States, and I hear that you were promoted to the chief taco officer for favors.
I was. So Favorite Delivery is owned by H-E-B, and H-E-B in Texas is the legend grocery store. I mean, I think that they won some kind of award for the best grocery store in America or something recently.
Yeah, they're up there.
Biggest country and biggest company, strongest employer, amazing. And their delivery service put out a calling that they were looking for a chief taco officer, and this person would travel Texas, try tacos. It was only supposed to be 3 months. And so to apply, you had to shoot in a video to them and tag them and say why you should be the chief taco officer. There was hundreds of applicants, right? And I remember I was teetering back and forth. Should I apply? I'm like, man, what if I don't get it? And then I was like, so in my mind, I was like, I doubt I'll get it. Literally the last day, I said, you know what? I'm going to do this. So I pulled up what they were asking for. And what I did is I actually looked at, because I saw a lot of the video entries because they were online, so I could see who was applying. And a lot of people who applied, so I had like a real emotional type of video, like, oh, I have, 5 taco tattoos, or, oh, hey, my parents own a taqueria, or whatever. But the one thing I noticed was Favor had asked, do you love Texas? That's a bullet point. Are you an adventurous eater? That's a bullet point. And so I hit all the bullet points. And one of the things that I have in my backyard in Texas is the Alamo. So what I did is, and no one else did this because it's a delivery service, I went to the Alamo. I had Favorite Delivery bring me tacos in front of the Alamo. And when the guy got there, I said, hey, dude, I'm applying for the chief taco job. I was like, can you walk in and hand them to me? I'm going to be saying this. And whenever I say this word, will you walk up and hand me the tacos? I was like, I'm going to pull one out, hand it to you. We're going to taco cheers, take a bite, and that's going to be it. So I did it, man. I submitted it literally, I think 4 hours before it closed. It was closing at midnight at like 8 o'clock. I submitted my entry and literally nail biter. Didn't hear anything for a little bit. Then got an email and there was meetings, Zoom meetings. And then I remember when I was a finalist, I think there was like 4 or 5 of us, and they were like, hey, can you submit your video? It was a creative challenge. Now, the one thing about this was, and I don't know if this is on purpose, I need to ask them, they gave no direction. All they said was, do a taco review the way you would if you were chief taco officer. There was no creative brief, nothing. So it was like, man, I got to figure out how I would do this and present it to the people. So it was like nerve-wracking, right? So one of the things I did is I went to Ray's Drive-In. So in San Antonio, Puffy Tacos are originated from here, and Ray's Drive-In are the people who are credited for being the inventor of the Puffy Taco. So I went there. I knew the owners. And I said, hey, can I shoot a video here and kind of talk about San Antonio, the Puffy Taco, and use this as my creative challenge? And they're like, yeah, please do it. Submitted it. And I remember I got an email saying that they wanted to meet with me like a week later. And that week was I was so nervous because my wife is like, oh, you got this. It's yours. You got it. And I was like, H-E-B is a very professional organization.
Yeah.
There's only 4 or 5. Oh, I didn't know this. I was like, there's probably only a few finalists. I was like, they're probably going to say like, thank you for applying, but we've gone another way, maybe in the future. And she's like, no, I think you got it. I think you got it. And I was like, man, I don't know. I literally remember I got on the Zoom call, and I think they were a little late, and so that's even adding more to my nerves, right, man? And like my heartbeat is just like, they get on there and they're like, hey, so good news is we want to unofficially offer you the position. They're like, the lawyers haven't approved the contract, but as far as everything else goes, you're our pick. And they're like, would you accept? And I was like, yeah, where do I sign? And like I said, it was supposed to be 3 months, but there was such a positive response to those 3 months that they were like, well, hey, let's keep it on a couple more months. And then they're like, well, you didn't hit these cities. And we didn't realize that it was going to get like all the media attention it did. Because I mean, it was on, what is it? Where George Bush's daughter is, whatever TV show that is.
Oh,
like,
yeah. I know what you're talking about. I have family in Texas. I know what you're talking about. I can't remember it either.
Anyway, yeah.
Oh, good. Now that's going to bug me.
It's national. It's from New York. I can't remember her name, but yeah. So she talked about it there, and we got international coverage on this whole thing, and it was crazy because it was like the Business Insider contacted us, and like I was doing interviews with these publications, and it was like, this is crazy. Like I'm just going around eating tacos, and Business Insider, America, India, and Africa all did something, and it was just mind blowing. So we just continued doing it, and so I've been on a little over 2 years now, and they've expanded my role. So I went from still the chief taco officer, but I am also now considered the chief tasting officer. So I'm incorporating other foods as well.
Nice.
But I will say that tacos are definitely my favorite spots. The taquerias are like my favorite spots to hit up.
Yeah. So how big of a following did you have before you entered into that? Like, were you pretty well known at that point, or were you kind of, still smaller time and then that boosted you?
I would say that I was, I've probably doubled my audience on all my platforms since then, but I was pretty well known here in San Antonio. Just because San Antonio is, I think, seventh largest city, but it's really like a big town.
Massive.
Everyone kind of knows each other. So it's like a big town. People know each other. Most taquerias or restaurants, they know all the foodies here in town. And I had been covering food here at that point for like, I don't know, maybe like 5 years or something.
Okay, nice.
So, yeah.
Texas is Texas and California, as different as a lot of people want to paint us, are wildly similar in a lot of ways. One of those being sheer square footage. I spent some years in Fort Worth. My mom is a Texas girl. I still got family back there. The regional differences in the food are wild. I mean, whether you're talking about like the vacation stuff in Houston or like some of the OG spots up in Dallas, when you're covering all this spot, I mean, first of all, I hope you got a car that good gas mileage, because we're talking a lot of driving. But like, what are some of the things that you've discovered about Texas cuisine the more you've moved about? Because there's more than Tex-Mex. I mean, there's a lot more out there.
No,
which is not bad, by the way.
And one of the things I tell people is I have the opportunity to tell the tale of Texas through tacos, right?
Yeah.
And through food. And that's the way I approach it. And whenever people don't understand exactly what I'm saying, to elaborate or kind of break it down and explain to them, I say, okay, so we're in Texas. Barbecue's a big thing. 10 years ago, when you walked into any barbecue spot, there was not tacos on the menu. But in the last 10 years, you have seen a fusion of Tex meets Mex. And now you don't walk into a barbecue spot without there being tacos on the menu. I mean, it's expected at this point. And I tell people, this is since Texas is such a melting pot for all cultures, such a melting pot for all cuisines. I mean, it's a beautiful thing. People come here, and because of the heavy Hispanic cultural like cuisines, they adopt this, and these fusions are born. So you have like Chinese tacos, Korean tacos, or like you have like these pozoles, or I mean, just all this beautiful food, and they're incorporating the Mexican culture and the Texas culture also, because I would say barbecue, people are using brisket for different things. It's really cool, man. And I get to tell that story and how I pick the spots, because everyone always says, well, how do you pick your spots? Like most people, I eat first with my eyes on Instagram or social media or TikTok. And what I look for is I look at the spots and the food looks great. I'll look a little bit deeper and say, hey, what's the history of this spot? And I'll look and say, hey, these people have a really good story, or it's a legacy spot. Those are kind of the things I look for. Or maybe it was like some sort of, they just hit the market and they just nailed it, and they're doing amazing, right? So these are the kind of the things I look for before I go out. And sometimes I'll contact the spots and I'll say, hey, I'm coming, I'd like to talk to the owner. And then other times I just like to show up and just kind of experience the whole vibe of the place as anyone else would, right? Just walking through the door. And I will say, man, I've met some amazing people. I've made some beautiful, beautiful relationships, and I have learned so much about Texas. And the one thing I have learned is that I don't know what I thought I knew about food and Texas, right? So I know where I thought I had this big knowledge, I don't. I'm still learning. And it's so small, the amount of knowledge I actually have, because it's literally every time I walk into a place, it's like, oh, this is unlocked these 4 or 5 different things that I need to look into or whatever. So, man, it's been an amazing journey. And I feel very blessed to be able to be the guy who was picked from hundreds of people to actually have this job and to do it,
Well, brother, you touched on something that I wanted to ask about because, I mean, Texas is a very proud place. It's a place that's near and dear to my heart. A lot of people love it. I mean, sure. People who are from there, it is a diehard sense of pride that you don't find in a lot of other spots. You took on this job just wanting to kind of again, be the CTO, tell the story through tacos. But you even mentioned it yourself. You're now unpacking the history of a lot of these places and telling some of these family stories and stuff like that. What does that feel like to you to be able to do?
So I think it's amazing. There's so many, when it comes to food and the internet, there's so many uneducated folks and there's so many closed-minded folks.
We're looking at you, uneducated folks.
One of the things I think is hilarious, and you being in California, you're gonna be like, oh yeah, I see this all the time. So I'll post something and be like, oh, those aren't real, those aren't authentic, those aren't real tacos. I'm like, oh, okay, cool. Yeah. And yeah, I'm from California. Those aren't real tacos. I'm like, okay, cool. So obviously you don't understand the way food culture is built. It all has to do with resources and the availability of these resources. And when they're not there, people start using other things. If that was the case, then our authentic tacos would be lamb and we would still be eating heroes and calling them tacos, because al pastor came from Lebanon. And it was just because of the availability through the Lebanese coming over into the Mexico City area and not having the ability to lamb, that it switched over to pork, and the spices were the same, and they just kind of created their own thing in the way it's cooked. They call it a trompo, which it looks like the way the hero shawarma things are cooked, and it's called a spit. And and it's funny because a trompo is like a toy, like a little spinny toy. So it's just that culture was developed into, you saw the two cultures, the Lebanese and the Mexican culture merge. And, there's tacos árabes, which is really cool. It's like Middle East, Arabic tacos. And they're still very prevalent in Mexico as well.
And they're phenomenal.
For me, just unpacking all this knowledge is amazing. And then you have closed-minded people like, oh, those aren't real tacos, they're not authentic. And it's like, well, any taco, wherever it is, it's authentic to its area because it's there. Right? Because they're like, oh, we don't use yellow cheese in Mexico. I was like, we never said you did. It's just really funny because so many people, and they'll come at me and they'll be like, oh, well, you're a no sabo kid. And I'm like, oh, okay, cool. Well, in my household, we speak Spanish. My kids speak Spanish. It's like, so people come at me for different things, but I've realized that you cannot please everybody on the internet. Even the way I talk. I recently was attacked by a guy from, I think it's Univision in Chicago. Because in Texas, we chop up our Spanish words all the time, right? So instead of saying taqueria or taqueria with a Q, I say it with a K. I say taqueria, and that's just the way I say it. And the majority of people here say taqueria, that's the way we've pronounced it. This guy came at me, and I'm like, okay, obviously you're the gatekeeper of the Mexican language and Spanish language, the way it's spoken in Mexico. And it was really cool to see how so many people came to not necessarily my defense, but just told him, we don't understand it. You're from Mexico. You get mad when people don't speak Spanish. Then if they speak Spanish, but it's not to your liking, you still attack them. So which is it that you want? And what I think a lot of people are so closed-minded and they don't understand is I'm Mexican-American. I'm from Texas, right? And they're like, well, the food you're eating is not authentic. It's like, it's authentic to us because it was developed here in Texas, and Tex-Mex is a very real thing. And and a lot of it is got the heavy cultural roots from Mexico, right? So it's just progressively gone across the border and it's here. When you come to Texas and you look at places like El Paso and Juarez, there's a fence which separates it, but as far as the culture goes and the food culture, it's the exact same.
Yeah.
And what people don't realize is that changes because of, like I said, the availability of resources and spices and all these things. And what makes it so beautiful is just that when people don't have what they need to make, the actual authentic, people say that, we use that word a lot, the authentic stuff, then they improvise, right? But one of the things I like to tell people, and I'm like, you can argue with me, you can hate me for saying it, but this is historical fact. The first mention of tacos in America was in San Antonio, and that's something you can't argue. I mean, as the Mexican miners were moving up with the railroad, they went to California and they came to Texas. And the first publication that put it out was in San Antonio, and it was the Chili Queens, and it was the wives of the Mexican migrant workers. They were selling tacos on the streets of San Antonio. This is like the late 1800s, right? And people were like, oh, no, tacos were here in California before that, or tacos were in Arizona before that. I never said that they weren't. I'm just saying the first mention in history is from a publication here in Texas in San Antonio. I'm not saying that we're the taco capital of the world. I'm just saying you can argue you can argue with all you want, but the fact is, first publication here in San Antonio. So
Right. It's kind of funny when you look at California, Arizona, and Texas. I think those are the three states that argue the most about we're like the first, American state to have tacos. We are the introduction to Mexican food,
Absolutely.
yada, yada. We're always butting heads, but, it goes back as far as I think the Aztecs, right? We think they invented masa, and so we can always argue about what's authentic and whatnot, but yeah, it's kind of silly.
Yeah, I think so it was like in the 1500s, in like one of the, I forgot what region it was in Mexico, but it's documented. They were serving, I think it was the quesadores. They were serving fish on what they called, I think it was called corn flatbread or whatever, which it's like, oh, that's a tortilla, bro. So they were serving fish tacos back then. And like a lot of people, they don't realize, if you look at history, all the information about tacos, about every cuisine is there. You just have to do your research. But I think what happens is a lot of people, food is so nostalgic to everybody. That's why people are so passionate about it. And people will like literally want to box you whenever they feel that you're saying something that's not true. But I welcome everyone's opinion. And honestly, what people don't realize about me is the more controversy I get whenever I say something or I post something, the more the algorithm likes it, and then the more they push it out, and that just benefits me. So if you really wanted to get to me and hurt me, then don't like my post, don't watch my post, don't argue on my post or whatever, because otherwise you're just helping me out. Yeah, and I'm like, man, these people, they just really don't understand it. Like, it's ridiculous.
No, the more you interact, the more you hate. Literally, the more popular you make the content. Like, it's astounding that way. Texas cuisine has come a long ways, and I don't mean that in a disparaging way, like it was never there. I mean that in the way that like it's changed a ton, right? Like for years and years, Austin has been kind of blowing up. Houston has its own thing going on. Dallas has been going through a transformation. Fort Worth, a lot of places have been blowing up. This state and its cuisine pretty well at this point. What are some of the kind of trends and some of the awesome things that you're seeing? So for people that are either in state and they don't know about it, or they're out of state and they want to come visit, some of the things that they should know about.
Well, I think, and these are obviously like my opinions, and a lot of this, like data, I'm going to say, it just comes from my own market research as far as like my page goes, or like my friends who are foodies in Texas. Some of the most passionate foodies, in my opinion, in the whole state are in Houston. Houston is literally the melting pot for all cuisines. And if anyone ever goes to Houston, it is so rich and beautiful. There are so many good spots to eat. And it's very similar, in my opinion, to New York. There's so much competition, and all the competition is so high. If you don't have something that's good, you just don't survive. So for you to be surviving and thriving in Houston, especially like during COVID and after COVID, that means you have good food. Yeah. Right. And, I tell people, I'm like, Houston is just an amazing spot. You have it all. You have Mexican food. You have like Cajun food because they're so close to Louisiana. As a matter of fact, next week, I'll be in Houston covering crawfish because crawfish season's starting, man. It's such a big thing.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, I'm going to hit all the crawfish spots that are famous that everyone's always talking about. Excited about that. And then you have San Antonio and Austin. There was literally a taco war at I think it was like 2015, 2016 or something. Like the mayors at that point kind of were saying stuff back and forth, and it started. And I've talked to so many foodies and people who cover tacos in Austin, and I'm like, let's turn this more into a sibling rivalry if we can, because one of the things that a lot of people, they're like, oh, well, Austin doesn't have real tacos, or, tacos in Austin are no good. People tell me that all the time. And I'm like, that couldn't be further from the truth. I'm from San Antonio. I love Austin tacos. If you're eating bad tacos in Austin, then you just don't know where to go, or you're not following Eat Migos because there's so many amazing places and spots, people who've come from like Mexico City or like they're like on the border, man. And they're there and they're serving like beautiful like tacos and cuisines. And I mean, they're just nailing it. I will say, and I am a little biased because I'm from San Antonio, but I always tell everyone, in my personal opinion, like there is no better place for breakfast tacos than San Antonio. Like, and I would say, a close second would be Corpus because we have a very similar taco culture. I feel that, Austin probably has more like traditional or like people like say authentic type of tacos, because breakfast tacos aren't a thing in Mexico. Like that's literally a Tex-Mex thing, right? Yeah. And San Antonio, we're in the mecca of it, right? I mean, we have so many amazing breakfast taco spots, and the flour tortillas here. I mean, there's so many different kinds and different types, and the way people prepare them, and I always tell people when people are like, so, they ask me a lot of times, so what's your favorite kind of flour tortilla? And what I'll tell them is like, if I grab a flour tortilla and I have Mexican dandruff, which is the powder still left on my fingers after I'm done eating my taco, I call it the Mexican dandruff.
I haven't heard that in forever.
Like, that to me, it is the most beautiful thing, man. I'm in love with that tortilla, bro. Because like down in the valley, the tortillas are really thin, and they're kind of thick. I mean, kind of thin. They're not kind of. They're thin. You can kind of see the grease in them. As you move on up towards San Antonio, they get a little bit bigger and fluffier, and like things just change, right? And that's one of the things about the tacos, because the one thing that people always say is, oh, we don't eat flour tortillas in Mexico. I'm like, oh, okay, well, you've never been to northern Mexico, because they eat flour tortillas, right? And like in the RGV, the Rio Grande Valley here in Texas, the flour tortillas are very much same as it is like in northern Mexico. But going down to the valley, like I said earlier, like El Paso, Juarez, it is like, man, so the burritos there, next level. Like one thing I'll touch on is they say that's where burritos were born. If you talk California people, they're like, no, they were born here. There's folklore as to how it was born. People, if you're listening to this podcast, you can read all the folklore and make your own decision. I just know that they're prevalent in that area. And then as you get down like Laredo, Eagle Pass, like in the RGV, like McAllen, all these spots, man, the food is just so good. It's very closer to traditional food you would get in Mexico or northern Mexico, because obviously it's on the border, right? And coming up, you got Dallas, you got Austin, and then you got Austin and San Antonio, Corpus. Like I said, the taco culture in Corpus and San Antonio are very similar. Then you got Dallas. One of the things I'll say about Dallas is I always tell people Tex kind of meets Mex in like San Antonio. Once you kind of get north of San Antonio, the Hispanic culture isn't there. There's not as big of an influence, right? Yeah. So one of the things I love about Dallas is the tacos there, which are very good, and there are traditional tacos, but a lot of people have taken and made these fusions and have I would say elevated what are the traditional recipes. Like one of my favorite tacos in all of Texas is a spot in Dallas called Urban Taco. They took an al pastor and they call it the al pastor a la tuma. And the guy from Mexico City, he went to SMU and he's like, hey man, there's no traditional tacos here. I'm from Mexico City. He graduates, stays there, opens up this taqueria, and he just kind of puts his own spin. And it's kind of like an elevated, like I said, fusion between Tex and Mex, right? So, one of the things about Dallas that I love is, man, they've really kind of taken the cuisine and taken it to the next level, which is a beautiful thing because they've kind of changed it a little bit, right? So that's kind of Texas. That's kind of the overview, I guess, of Texas tacos.
So I guess I wanted to touch on this. It looks like you're the brand ambassador for the Yuengling Brewery.
Yeah, let's talk about Yuengling. I wish we had some Yuengling.
I am. Yeah, man. Yeah. So if you're from the East Coast, or basically if you're from Texas all the way up onto the East, then you are in Yuengling country.
Yeah.
For those of you in California who are watching this, sorry, you're missing out.
Yeah, for those of you in California, we want it. Give it to us.
So Yuengling is the oldest brewery in America. A lot of people don't realize that. They were here first, and they've been brewing beer longer than anybody. How I became, there's 5 ambassadors. And one of the things, it's funny because I look at the lineup and I'm like, man, these other ambassadors are like professional sports people, or like the Lee Bryce, a famous country guy, famous country singer. And then there's me. And I remember whenever they first reached out, and I remember on my phone, I got a call and it said Pennsylvania. And I was like, this is one of those people trying to get me to renew my car warranty or whatever. So
right,
the
extended warranty, yeah.
And I was like, yeah, no, whatever. So, and then they called again. I'm like, no, we're not going to do this. So I think it was like the 3rd time it called. It was like the following day it called. And I'm like, who's calling me from Pennsylvania? And answered the phone, and it was them, and it was the brewery, marketing folks. And they introduced themselves, and I'm like, am I being punked? Like, so Yuengling, because Texas had only been Yuengling had only been in Texas for a year at this point, right? So they were still pretty new to, we're 2 years now, a little over 2 years. But, and I was like, they made a big splash when they first came, and I was like, okay, cool. And one of the things that, and I guess the position of CTO really helped me out with, they were like, hey, so, we're trying to look at, how to integrate into the Texas culture. And one of the things we're looking at is the cuisines. And they're like, when we put Mexican food, you pop up. We put tacos, you pop up. We put food. They like anything with Texas and food that we Google, your face pops up. They're like within the first couple searches. They're like, so we're in our meeting and we're like, man, we need to contact this guy because obviously he does a lot with food there in Texas.
Also, we had this one press release that came across our desk out of nowhere, and
yeah, exactly. And they were like, are you interested in a short-term contract? And I'm like, oh, okay, cool. Yeah, let's do it. And, I had worked with a lot of big brands. I was an ambassador for AT&T for 2 years. So whenever I signed the contract, it was short-term. I think it was also 3 months. I think 3 months is kind of like the training wheel period for big brands when they're working with creators, right? They're like, oh, let's do 3 months.
What can go wrong?
Yeah, exactly. If he doesn't do anything bad, then we may extend him or whatever. So I remember they said, okay, so we're giving you creative freedom, but send us the video first. We want to approve it, and we'll go from there. So I remember they got me beer. So, man, they set me up. I have beer, and they give me like this really cool cooler, and everything's there, and I have all the pieces. And I'm thinking, okay, so how am I going to make a splash with Yuengling? Because I'm fighting against Modelo, Dos Equis, Pacifico, all the traditional Mexican beers, right? And I'm like, how am I going to make this beer stand out, right? That this is good with Mexican food, right? So the first thing I was like, okay, well, let me drink a couple of the different kinds, right? Somebody had to drink the beer, right? It might as well be me, right? So I ate some with some tacos, and I'm like, hey, man, this market research is amazing, right? And I was like, hey, one of the things that I really liked it was with birria. So I contacted one of my favorite birria spots in town, and they were one of the ones in Texas. We dress our beers like they put the chamoy on there, and it like drips down. It's like freaking messy as hell, but like it's so good, right? And I remember I went to the spot, and they're doing it, and it's dripping down. And I remember like, you know what? Let me text Yuengling and let them know what I'm doing. And I said, hey, so I'm dressing the can up, blah, blah, blah. They're like, you're what? I'm like, I'm dressing the can. I was like, that's what we do down here. And they're like, well, we don't know what that means or what that looks like. So it was so funny because like they're like, can you show us a picture or send us like what it looks like? So I did. And they look at it and they're like, they're like, I mean, they've never seen this, right? So I think they're just trying to figure out, like, are we going to let this guy go with this? Like, what is going on here? And finally, they're like, look, as long as it doesn't cover up the Yuengling name or hide the brand when it's dripping, we're fine with it. We're going to give you a chance, right? We're going to see what you can come up with. So I do the video, and you can go still look. It's on their it's on their page, it's on my page. So my opening shot is Yuengling flight, and like the guy is dressing it and painting it, and the chamoy is dripping. Then I grab it, I open it up, and I pour some of the consomme, and I get a burrito-taco, and I'm freaking dunking it, and it's splashing everywhere. And you're just like you're at SeaWorld in the splash zone. You got beer everywhere, man. My feet, my shoes are all wet. Literally, I'm like, I don't care. I'm going for it, right? And I take a bite of it, and and then my voiceover is like, my favorite pairing with Yuengling is flight is with birria or whatever I said. And I remember I sent it to them, and they're like, okay, well, let's put it out. Let's see what happens. After 2 days, it became their most liked and viewed post they've ever. They still don't have a post that's ever beat it, man.
That's awesome.
Killed it. And they were like, oh my goodness. And I was like, look, this is literally the Texas culture, man. I'm like, if they don't see a dressed beer here, like they're gonna be like, yeah, I don't want that, right? I can go get my Dos Equis or whatever and do it. Yeah, man, it killed it. And then from there on, they just trusted me, and they're like, hey, you do you. So now I've incorporated making micheladas and like just doing a whole bunch of cool things that, are part of the San Antonio culture, right? Or Texas, I say San Antonio, but the Texas culture, right? So it's been really fun. So I'm in my second year with them now, and it's really cool. I became an actual Yuengling drinker. Before I had never even tasted it, and I tasted it, and it's funny because like I'll be out with friends sometimes, and they'll be like, hey, what do you want to drink? And I'm like, do you serve Yuengling? Oh yeah. And I was like, okay, well, I'll take a lager or a flight or whatever. And people will be like, oh, you have to drink that, right? And I'm like, I mean, it's not like I'm gonna get fired or like the beer police are gonna come arrest me if I'm not drinking Yuengling. I was like, but I actually like the beer. I mean, it really is good, and I enjoy it now. So now I'm a fan. I drink it, and I think even when my contract ends at some point, I'll still be a Yuengling lover and a Yuengling drinker. And I think that people who have tasted Yuengling, it's really the following for it is crazy. People absolutely go nuts for Yuengling.
Oh yeah,
and yeah, I hear people all the time, and whenever we post, we see people in California, oh, send it over here, or New Mexico, send it over here. When you come and bring in Yuengling, and I'm like, well, I'm not in those decisions or those meetings. I can't tell you where it's going to be, but I can tell you where you're going to get it now. So, but it's been amazing. And then I think also one of the things that's really cool is we just signed a soccer player from he lives in Mexico, and from the league over there, and so he's an ambassador now. So it's really cool, man. Like to see Yuengling and how they're adopting the Mexican culture also with the beer, and it's just a beautiful thing. Like I said, it's like the food, man. You're just all these things and cultures just mixing together. Man, it's great. It's great.
I want to ask you about a uniquely Texan thing, because again, we got listeners from all over, but again, we want to send people to these places to experience these tacos and to like be informed like by people like you and all of our other guests. So when people are going to go visit Texas, they're going to discover something that I think is a national goddamn treasure, and I stand by that. And it's something you, as much time you spend on the roads in Texas, are probably very familiar with, and that is Buc-ee's.
Sure. So
will you please describe Buc-ee's?
So Buc-ee's, if there was ever going to be a zombie apocalypse and you wanted to survive it and thrive in it, you would go to Buc-ee's.
Yeah.
They literally have everything you need to survive. Imagine every store that you purchase stuff from all under one roof. That's Buc-ee's. And then what they've done is they've made this beaver into like a Mickey Mouse kind of like a figure. So it's basically Texas's version of Disneyland with a beaver, and like every single kind of store, anything. I mean, they sell tacos there, and the tacos there are really good, too. I've done many posts on them.
They're gas stations, they're truck stops, but you see it. It's like this glowing beacon of hope.
Yeah, it's literally a Texas stop sign. It's like this red beaver face, and you're like, oh, I got to stop. It's like a gnat. When you see it, you're like, oh my God, I don't want to stop there, but I'm exiting now. Oh my goodness, they're taking all my money. Like literally, when I'm on the road, this is no joke. My kids will be like, hey, Dad, are you going to stop at Buc-ee's and buy us a shirt or something? And I'm like, yeah. And I mean, they expect these things. Buc-ee's is amazing. I mean, they have their own bakery. Like I said, they do their own barbecue. They do their own food. I mean, they do everything. They have their own swag. They have their own clothing line. They have everything. And the gas stations, I think each one of them has I think there's only one that's kind of small, but the rest of them have 100+ pumps.
Oh yeah.
Like literally, imagine a gas station with 100+ pumps. And it's as big as a mall. Like when you're driving by, it's not like this little bitty convenience store. No, it's literally it's the most, you cannot miss it. They're even going to, it doesn't matter where you are in Texas. You can be in the most remote place in Texas. You're going to see a sign that says Buc-ee's 410 miles ahead on the right.
Yeah.
And you're like, man, these guys are just marketing everywhere.
The lights come up in the distance like Vegas. Like you just see it in the middle. And we should mention, by the way, for anybody watching, we're not talking 100 pumps of cars. We're talking rigs, the whole 9 yards. I know this is a taco-focused podcast, but you can't talk about Texas if somebody hasn't been there without talking about Buc-ee's.
Dude, I'm clearly missing out. Never having tried Buc-ee's, I clearly have to try it.
So I was with some friends in Orlando, Florida one day, and I'm walking down the street. And I happen to be wearing a Buc-ee's t-shirt because in Texas, I think we're all issued a Buc-ee's t-shirt. We don't even know where we get it.
It's part of your HOA dues.
Every one of us has one. Yeah. I mean, my kid, we have hoodies anyway. So I'm wearing a Buc-ee's shirt. And this group of people, they're like, oh, sweet Buc-ee shirt, man. We hope to go there one day. And I'm walking and I'm like, and I stop. This is no joke. They said it and I heard it, but it didn't register. And I stopped and I'm like, hey, y'all know about Buc-ee's here? And like, oh yeah, they're going to open one here in Florida soon. I'm like, really? And they're like, oh yeah. And they know everything. They know more about Buc-ee's than I think the people building the Buc-ee's, right? They're like, oh, they're going to have this and have that and have that. And it's just this huge cult following. But if you go, it's literally Disney World. It is. The other day I stopped by there because I legit needed gas.
Yeah. And
I went inside. I was like, well, you know what? They have the cleanest restrooms in Texas. Literally, I don't even know. You never see anyone cleaning them, but they're the cleanest restrooms. That's what's the magic of part of it. So I see Buc-ee. There's someone dressed in a Buc-ee outfit. So there's this beaver walking around the store, and he's probably it's like a celebrity, right? So it's this crowd of people and all this stuff. And normally I don't get starstruck ever. I see this freaking beaver and I'm like, damn, I got to get a picture with this guy. My kids would go nuts. My friends, I got to post it on social media. I literally go in that madness of a group of people and I go and I give him, we slap hands. I hug him and I'm like, I am 47 years old. Looking at this beaver, I'm like, what is wrong with me? And literally, I literally, I was like, man, I can't believe this. But yeah, Buc-ee's is this whole thing. It is, if you come to Texas and you don't go to Buc-ee's, and you haven't experienced Texas really.
Yeah. Entire episode all about the best tacos. And no, we settled on, we got to go see that 18-year-old kid dressed as a beaver at the gas station.
Exactly. But hey, so to tie it together, so they have what you guys would call burritos, but they're tacos. They're rolled like burritos, right? So anyway, they have a Philly cheesesteak burrito. Brother, let me tell you what, man. They have hit on every culture. So it doesn't matter where you're from in America. If you're from California, you see the burrito, you're there. Texas, you're there. You're like, man, this is good. The East Coast, Philly cheese, man, it is an amazing thing. And I've posted about it multiple times. They have other tacos, right? Also, but man, their tacos are really good there, man. Really. And I would also plug, so their kolaches are really good too, man. So if you go try the tacos and the kolaches, I promise you, and you got to get the beaver nuggets. I know it's a funny thing to say, but the beaver nuggets, they're I don't even know how to describe. Yeah. They're like these little airy kind of imagine a sweet Cheeto. It's like a cheese puff, right? But it's sweet. It's got cinnamon and sugar on it. It's very similar consistency. That's the best way to describe it. They're brown, very good.
We got a couple barbecue guys out here, and they do a great. They combine barbecue, and because he's Texas inspired, and they do like brisket tacos and stuff like that. And every time he goes to Texas to see the people at Snow's and see all his boys and all their family, I'm like, yo, you going to Buc-ee's? Bring me some back.
Yeah, man.
Yeah, bring them on the plane.
Yeah, man. You know, I'll say this. This is like, so this is a big deal for us here. Well, more so if you love tacos and you're into the culture and stuff. You know, one of the James Beard finalists, and he's again, is from the Burton Bean Company.
Yeah.
Ernest Cervantes, dear friend of mine. Him and Ed, the clan over there, man, they are pushing out the best, in my opinion, the best barbecue in Texas. Like, it'll literally change your perspective on all barbecue if you taste it. But on Sundays, Ernest is from Uvalde, and he does a complete Mexican like menu. Like I call him so you got a taquero, I call him a barbaquero, right? I don't know if that's a real word, but I call him barbaqueros.
I like it.
Right.
Yeah.
So he's a pit master guy. He's doing these beautiful like meals, and he's got, man, all these different tacos and all this stuff. And it's just, if you ever have the chance to experience burnt bean, you should go. But if you have the chance to experience it on a Sunday morning, it is literally next level. And like I said, second year James Beard finalist. And one of the things, you know, he said to me one time, because I talk to him pretty often. He's like, you know, it's just a humbling thing to know that these people that are also finalists all around America for the James Beard Award, they're serving their plates of fine food on this fine china, and there's all this beautiful plating. He goes, and I'm the guy who smells like barbecue serving it on paper. He's like, it's just humbling to think that what I'm doing, and I serve it it's sloppy. It's just freaking meat on paper, and I'm serving it to you. He's like, that I'm even in that league. And you know what, man, kudos to him. Like I said, you know, they have good brisket. Speaking of brisket tacos, man, I just had a pretty controversial post this year, earlier in the year, early January, because the New York Times said the best taco in America was at a brisket taco here in San Antonio, a place called Garcia's.
Oh, that's right. I remember that.
So
yeah.
So I go and I post about it. And this is the greatest thing. And anyone watching this, you can go to my page and you can look at the post. First off, people are like, what do you know? You're in New York City. And I'm like, obviously you did not listen to the post or read the caption or anything. It's literally, and I never even said it's the best taco in Texas. I literally just say, New York Times has said this is the best taco in Texas. I'm going to try it out. And I said, hey, look, you know what? Kudos to them. It's, you know, they picked a Tex-Mex fusion, right? So it's a brisket on a flour tortilla. It's got pico on it, and you got your hot sauce. That's the way we do brisket tacos. Or if we do it for breakfast, we'll usually put egg on it. And brisket, egg, and cheese. Next, I mean, it's a beautiful, beautiful taco. I love them. But so I go and I cover it, man, and it was the most controversial thing. People, oh, that's not authentic. Oh, that's not traditional. Oh, that's, you know, it's got yellow cheese. Oh, this and that or whatever. But yeah, that's how serious we are about our barbecue. That the New York Times, you know, picked the best taco in America to be that one last year, at the end of last year. So it was cool to go try it out. I hadn't had that taco probably in like about 5 years, but it was refreshing to see that it actually made that list and go try it out. It was good.
That's awesome.
And it's a good spot. If you ever come to San Antonio, I would say, you know, it's a good taco. We've had a couple of them. I can't remember the year prior, one of the best restaurants from the New York Times was a taqueria here in San Antonio also. And I'll never forget, after that came out, I was like, oh man, I've never been to that spot. It's on the south side. And when I say, I don't know if this is a rule for taquerias that have really good food that they have to have the worst parking. I feel like if you go and they have the worst parking, you know the food is going to be amazing.
Yeah,
right?
that's generally true. I would abide by that rule. Yeah, the less parking, the better. Yeah,
exactly, right. So I remember going and, you know, fighting for parking and all that stuff. And I remember walking up and, you know, in our culture, in the San Antonio culture, the older Hispanic men take on this like fatherly Uncle Theo role for anyone who's kind of younger. And I remember I walk up to the taqueria and I'm like, and he's like, he's like, mijo. He calls me mijo, right? So he's like, mijo, it's going to be like a 50-minute wait. He's like, the New York Times put out this thing and we're happy for it. He's like, but man, he's like, we're just overwhelmed. Like we don't know what's going on. So he doesn't know me or what I do for a living or anything. And I'll never forget this. So I wait the 15 minutes, me and a friend, we go in there and I pull out my phone and I'm videoing it. He comes up and he goes, "Hey, mijo, are you going to put that on TikTok?" And like, he's whispering to me like it's a secret. And I was like, yeah, I was going to post them here. And he's like, "Man, I don't know if we can handle that." And I was like, "You know what?" I was like, "I don't know." I was like, "Look, I just like to document what I do." I didn't tell him that I didn't tell him what I do for a living or anything like that. Right. And I'm like, "Hey man, I just like to document." I was like, "And just show you some love. I want to show people how proud I am that, you guys hit the New York Times, top 10 for best, restaurants. And you happen to be a taqueria here in San Antonio." And he's like, "All right, mijo, but I'm just letting you know, like, I don't know how much more we can take." So I'm thinking like, I'm going to post it. It'll get like on my page. I'll let you know, it probably won't hit the way it, I didn't think it was going to hit the way it hit. I'll never forget it. I post and I don't know, I think I got 300,000 or 400,000 the first day on TikTok and I don't know, Instagram, maybe like 100,000 or 200,000 in the first couple of days. And then I remember going back and he's like, "Hey, didn't I tell you not to post that on TikTok?" And he's like, all our regulars are still mad at us. He's like, "I've had to put tables outside in the parking lot now because," and I'm like, "Yeah, your parking's horrible." He's like, "Yeah, well now we have less parking because we have tables in the parking lot." He's like, "It's just this problem," and it was just so funny. But I just remember he's like, "Aren't you the one that?" He's like, "Didn't I tell you to put it on TikTok?" And I'm like, "Hey man, sorry about that. I didn't realize it was going to have that kind of reach."
I didn't know.
You know what, man? I was like, ride the wave, man. But yeah, it was funny. It was a good time.
That's kind of a good problem to have, though. Like, I've got so much business that I don't even know where to tell my people to park.
Yeah. I'll have to send you guys what this parking situation looks like. Like, it's really horrible. It's one of the worst I've ever been.
It's just going to make me want to go there more. Like, yeah.
Yeah.
Just people up on hills on the side. Yeah, it doesn't matter.
It's that exclusivity,
Yeah, exactly.
That's really cool.
So, I guess real quick, before we wrap things up, what's like the craziest story that you've got doing what you've been doing? Like going around the state, tasting tacos, what's like the standout moment for you that was like, man, that was crazy? For better or worse, that was a crazy experience.
So I would say that there was this so whenever you go and you do what I do, you have to be an adventurous eater, right? And like, we all are adventurous eaters and but we all kind of have our limits. I think everyone kind of has a limit. So I remember I was at an event here in town, and it was a taco event, and I'm there. And I don't know if they got every taqueria that was just going to serve the most crazy off the wall things all at one spot. And I remember, like, I can usually hit this stuff as a one-off, right? Like, oh yeah, I eat a cow eyeball, but I can't eat a cow eyeball followed up with scorpions and then eat ants as my next taco. And so like this,
just
literally
back
this
to back
event,
to back.
It was one was crickets, and it had like heavy guacamole crickets. The other one was ants. Then I ate a double scorpion taco, which
Chapalinas I'm okay with. Chapalinas I'm good with. Scorpions are no.
They're very flaky. It was like, so I was like, okay, that's cool.
Got a weird breakfast cereal vibe in my head.
They had to. Then there was some tripas there, and that they gave me, and I'm like, okay, so we're just going for it at this point. And then I remember the cow eye, and so eating a cow eye is considered good luck. The bottle cow, when you're doing the head and when you eat the eye, it's considered good luck here. And I think like for me, that's the only time I've ever actually been physically sick. But the thing is, because I'm going around to all these folks, and they're so excited to share with me, like, oh, this is the culture where I came from. And I just remember, I mean, it's a cool story because people were showing love and giving me all these chances to eat all this great stuff. But all in the same, man, I was so sick. Just because you go from eating all these different hot sauces that are hot and all these bugs.
That's a lot.
And just all this random greasy stuff. And like, it never ended. I think there was like 20 or something vendors there. And people were like, oh, like one of the ones was an Austin vendor and was Austin Taqueria. And they call themselves the Taco Mafia. And what they did was very creative. They used duck fat to confit their food. And as good as it tasted, it was just really greasy. And it was like, man, I just can't handle this. Like I physically couldn't, but it was hard for me I couldn't say no. I at least had to taste all this stuff. And I would say that, I think that was probably the story of, I love what I did so much that I sacrificed. Man, I remember I went home that night. I did not feel good. The next day I woke up not feeling good. I don't think I ate. And I'm an eater. I don't think I ate the whole next day. I think I just drank water pretty much, and maybe like an orange juice or something. Just because, not because the food wasn't good. It was just it was just too many different. It was just too many different types of tacos and bugs and just off the wall things all at one spot, man. And
just
like I said,
your system can only handle so much. Like I've been in that boat before.
Variety.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was just variety of stuff, man. And it was just like, man, I can't say no because I don't want to offend anyone. But man, I really don't feel good. And I remember at one point I was like holding back from like actually vomiting because I was like, man, I just can't take this anymore. But yeah, man. But I did it. I did it. I did it for the gram, man. I did it for the gram.
But, we sacrificed. So we sacrificed for you.
Yeah,
dude, I love that sentence. Man, I had too many tacos and bugs.
Man,
I'm down for some grasshoppers down. Like I'm down, and ants aren't bad, but you can only do so much.
I've done like chocolate covered crickets and grasshoppers and things like that, but like putting eyeballs and stuff in my tacos, that's
It was brains. It was brains that was the one that got me one time.
Yep, that's
me too. Dude. So I had Cecil's that night as well, man. And so the other thing is, so this is an evening event. So it's not like I'm eating this at like 2 p.m. This is like 8, 9, 9:30 at night, and people are just handing me this stuff. I was like, man, dude, I just can't do anymore. And the last thing I actually ate was Cecil's. I remember they handed it to me. And some people cook Cecil's and they cook it to where it doesn't look like brain. I mean, brother, it was literally like Indiana Jones. They got the brain and just put it in the
monkeys
taco.
Call you
you're like, and I'm like looking at it. Yeah, I can like see what it's thinking at this point. I'm like, oh my goodness.
And it's thinking,
I was like,
you're screwed.
Disguise this. Yeah, man. And I remember there, and the lady, she was so nice, and she's like, "Oh, let me know what you think." And I'm like, "Ooh, okay." I was like, "We're going for it." So I remember biting it, and I'm like, "Oh," and I'm eating. I'm like, "Man, this is so good." I mean, it tasted good. Like I said, all the food was great. I applaud everybody and the way they were cooking. I just mixing it. It's just something you shouldn't do, man. A little too much for me. So I've learned my lesson.
That's funny. I thought our Carolina Reaper story was nuts, but that definitely takes the cake.
Yeah.
Yeah, man. Oh, and you throw that on there because people like sometimes at these places, it's not who has the best tacos. It has has the hottest hot sauce. So you're like on a Mexican version of Hot Ones, right?
Which is a whole different level. No, don't you dare. Sorry. Our like, producer's in the background. He's reaching for the bottle. I'm like, I will no.
Not happening. That was a one-time thing.
Man. And
throw this monitor at you.
And it's such like a machismo thing to say, but like, you bite it and like the longer you can handle not drinking anything, and then you say things like, "Oh man, yeah, man, this has a bite on it, doesn't it?" Yeah, and you're like holding back from choking.
Yeah, you're PTSD
like,
right now.
That really kicks in at the end, right? Yeah, yeah, and you're saying things to like try to like make yourself feel better, and you're like, "Ah, yeah," and then you walk away, and then you're just like sucking on whatever liquid you can to try to soothe.
Right,
just having a gentle cry in the corner. Yeah.
Dude, I took spoonfuls of sour cream. I was sitting there, tears running down my face. I'm sweating bullets. Like, I just need some sour cream, man.
I've never been mad at Pacifico. I'm like, I thought you had my back. Why weren't you Yuengling?
So I saw you guys had my homie Will on the podcast not too long ago, and I saw the thing where is a burrito a taco, and it was just so funny because that's something that I that's a question I get asked a lot, and I agree with Will. Like by definition, if you look at Webster's, I mean they're the same. Now I will say that the caveat always is in my household, if you asked for a burrito, you weren't going to get a taco. It was going to be something totally different. But by definition, I think one of the things I had to swallow as being, and like I realized somebody told me when I was like, oh no, I used to be like, oh no, burrito's not a taco. They're two totally different things. And they asked why, and I was like, well, my grandma, when she'd make a burrito, it was folded and wrapped, and I explained the whole thing. And I remember this person. Yeah, it was a harsh realization. He's like, well, just so you know, Webster Dictionary says it's X. This is that they're the same. And unfortunately, your grandma does not, her definition doesn't rate, it's like on that level. And he's like, so, he's like, so you're just going to have to make an adjustment here because it is the same. And I remember going home and looking up the definition. Yeah, dude, this guy he said it to me and it literally stung the way he said it, right? I'm like, hey, man, like my grandma's passed and here you are disrespecting her like that. But I went home and I remember looking up the definition and sitting there and there's this harsh reality, right? And I don't ever think there was any malintent on his part. He was just trying to be like, hey, man, your grandma isn't the person who dictates what is what in the culinary world. Like there are chefs and there's
like, you've never met my grandma.
This is right. Exactly. I was like, yeah. But I remember that whole volley and I had to compromise my thoughts. And I will say that a burrito and a taco are the same thing.
Ooh, getting controversial on the TacoTuesday.com podcast.
I heard it here first.
And then you got, I mean, because then people say like, well, flautas. And I'm like, yeah, but if you go to some places, they'll call those tacos dorados, right? And like, but they're flautas, right? Yep. So, I mean, I think it's just the term and the region as to where they're being served and how they're being served. But people say all kind of stuff, man. And at the end of the day, it's all the same thing. It's a tortilla with stuff in it, right? Wrapped or so. Right. Yeah, so that's just my 2 cents with that question, man. And as much as I'd like to say it isn't, it is. I have to side. I have to side on that. Yeah.
You know, I knew it was a debate, but I didn't realize how seriously people took it. Right. So when I asked the question, some of the feedback we got was like, "Are you kidding me? I'm going to fight you in a parking lot." You know, that's unacceptable for you to say that. It's like, all right, calm down.
People will go to blows, man. People will like over this, and it's like, man, calm down. Like it's okay. It's not that serious. But yeah, man, it's a a thing, man. People get so upset about it, and I have to agree. It's a taco. I mean, it's by definition the same thing, man.
All right, we mean no offense, everybody. Just to clear the air.
Sorry, guys. Yeah.
All right, you guys. You got anything else we got to go over? Anything we didn't cover you wanted to discuss?
I'm good on mine.
Thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it. Taco Tuesday. I know it's National Margarita Day, so I'm assuming you guys have been pounding margaritas. Yeah, there you go.
Well, we had our first one.
Podcast responsibly. Chris, if people want to reach out to you, if they want to follow you on Instagram, if they're not already, if they want to check out what you do and follow along and reach out and like plan their own trip to Texas, or reach out if they're already in Texas and they haven't run into you at a Buc-ee's.
Eat Migos.
Yeah.
Yeah, Eat Migos, EatMigos. I made up the word, so if you Google it, everything is all about me. So
SEO, baby, SEO.
Right on, man.
That's exactly right.
Brother,
hey guys,
thank you for the time, man. This was a blast.
I truly appreciate it, man. Well, and I hope to be on again soon.
Oh, we'll make it happen, dude. This was it was a pleasure to have you on. And it was a good conversation. So we'll definitely do it again.
No doubt, brother.
Yeah, man. Pleasure meeting you guys.
Thank you, man. Appreciate it.
All right, guys. I guess that concludes another edition of the TacoTuesday.com podcast. Chris Flores, a.k.a. Eat Migos. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure. Happy Taco Tuesday, everyone. Cheers.
TacoTuesday.com. Taco Tuesday. It's Taco Tuesday. Taco Tuesday. It's Taco Tuesday. Taco Tuesday.